Hello everybody, this is Tyler from Tcustoms, and today I'm going to show you how I built my Mandalorian suit. Now this project has been teased for years and years, so let's start from the beginning. Well, that sucks. With all the parts now printed and mostly finished, we can now move on to the shoulders. For the left shoulder, I'm going to finish using this random orbital sander. This is great for quickly sanding down low detail prints. I'll start off with 180 grit, which was a little strong for this, and finish it off with some hand sanding at 220 grit. I'll then blow off all the dust and give it a coat with filler primer. Once that dries, I'll sand it down again with 220 grit, being sure to wipe off my sandpaper from time to time because this stuff loves to gunk up. Now let's say you don't have money for endless amounts of sandpaper and power tools, or living in your mom's basement and don't want to wake everybody up in the middle of the night with, well, loud power tools. Not that I'm living in my mom's basement right now. So for this shoulder, I'll use my favorite method of smoothing prints, the card scraper. This is an easy to sharpen flat piece of metal, which makes quick work of 3D prints. Not only is it faster than sanding, it's also super satisfying. Kind of like today's sponsor, Bad Dragon. They also make scrapers in other sizes, allowing you to smooth out even the most detailed of areas. My longer LK1 has been suffering from major under extrusion issues lately, which is why on both of the shoulders, some of the layers have delaminated from each other. I'll use some super glue to keep it from fraying any further. I'll use some filler primer and some Mando spot putty to fill in the remaining imperfections.
You may be wondering where the first half of this video is.
Like most files from this build, the SD cards were somehow corrupted. Maybe I can find a way to get them back. But until then, I'll just try to explain the gaps. Now, I printed this piece in 2 halves in order to save on support material. So I'll send the backs of them and then glue them using some cheap and dirty super glue. I can't steal that, that's from another guy, but whatever. All of the armor pieces are most likely going to be held down with some Velcro. I'll put some of the hook side on this piece. That way, the undersuit can be soft loop side, which will make sewing much easier down the line. Probably. I'll glue the edges down with E6000 to prevent them from lifting. While it would look fine without it, I want the suit to have some built-in LEDs. This will greatly enhance the overall look of the suit with little effort. I hope. I got this voltage meter to replicate his red display on his gauntlet. I also purchased some blue LEDs from Bezos to make the whistling birds. Now, it would have been nice to 3D model the holes for the electronics before printing, but that didn't happen, so I'll just have to make them by hand. To power these electronics, I purchased some flashlights from the dollar store for only $1, which tells you how long ago this was filmed. I'll take it apart and remove the pieces that I need, including the battery holder and the switch. I'll then solder them together and test the circuit out. While having the light on the display be static looks fine, I want the numbers to fluctuate every once in a while, so I found this flickering candle to try out. I'll wire it up on the positive side, cover up the LED, and it seems to be doing the trick. Moving on to the whistling birds, I'll start off by stripping all of the wires. Once that's done, I'll solder all of the lights together. I'll use the same dollar store battery solution for these as well, which seems to work pretty well. I want to be able to activate these lights from the glove, so I'll wire an extension for the switch. I bought this cheap blaster on Amazon for like 20 bucks. It's not on Amazon anymore, but I remember it being pretty cheap. I'll start off by scuffing the blaster to a chalky finish, being sure to sand the seam line as much as possible. I'll then apply some filler primer and take down the orange peel with a Scotch-Brite pad. I'll use matte black for the base. For this blaster, I'm going to use some graphite powder for the metallic effects. I'll rub it on with a soft brush and buff it with a microfiber cloth, which gives it a really nice metallic effect. I'll then mix up some chocolate milk and mask off the handle. Once that's done, I'll apply the brown paint to the handle using my airbrush. Once that fully dries, I'll apply some clear coat to protect it from the next step, which is painting the grip using real wood stain. Now, the first time I saw this being used was in a video by Van Oak Props, which I highly recommend checking out his video if you want to do this paint job yourself, because I'm basically copying the whole thing. Now, this technique looks great, but it takes an eternity to dry. A little bit of heat can help speed up the process, but the oil still takes forever. But once it does dry, I'll apply a gloss clear coat to contrast the satin of the rest of the blaster. Sadly, some of the clear coat was lifted off by the masking tape. I could go back and respray it all, but this thing's meant to be battle damaged anyway, so I don't really care all that much. The tip of the blaster has this aluminum section, which I'll paint using some gloss black and some all-clad chrome, which turned out pretty terribly. So I'll sand it off, respray the black base and chrome, and try again, which turned out much better. I'll give it some clear to protect the finish. To further enhance the battle damage, I'll dry brush some silver rub and buff all over the surface. To get the gold effects, I'll use some gold rub and buff and apply it with my finger, which I didn't show on camera, but looks something like this. I am so funny. I use a flight suit, which I got online for about $70 as a guide. After I checked the fitment, I cut the template out and transferred it to my material. The ab portion was made from this fox blue leather I got from Amazon. No one says fox, it's faux. To make things easier while sewing, I taped the two halves together and cut off the excess. With the two halves now sewn together, I'll inside out the piece to see how it looks. It could be worse, I guess. Once I get the textures on there, hopefully it will look a lot better. After checking my reference, I cut out all the under textures using EVA foam. If I were to do this again, I'd make a nice real template instead of eyeballing it, because it's all kinda asymmetrical. After leaving this thing to dry for a while, I can now inside it out. It didn't pick up all the details like I was expecting, so I'll go in with some spray glue and push the fabric into the seams, which actually turned out pretty well. For the main strap portion, I first measured my waist and left a whole lot of extra. I then hemmed both sides, folded it over, and hemmed it again to give the stitching pattern details. Using a Scotch-Brite pad as a measuring tool, I put the stitch right down the center. I then put another stitch in the middle on both sides. Now, I don't want this piece to be too flat and two-dimensional, so I bought some fluff, which I'll use to give the whole thing volume like it has in the show. Which took some time to massage it smooth, but made it look a lot better. To hold this thing to my body, I'll once again be using Velcro, which will be cut and sewn into place. I'll then put Velcro on the back of the ab plate using some E6000, which I definitely filmed. Make sure to have the glue overlap the Velcro, which will prevent the Velcro from peeling off. With that, the cummerbund is finished, besides the weathering. For this build, I'll be weathering all the pieces at the same time to get a more cohesive look. Fits nicely and will look great once the rest of the suit is done. Now, the shoulder straps were a little tricky to make. The first time, the leather was too thick and broke several needles, as shown in the clip here. So I bought this thinner faux leather from Joann's Fabric, which was much easier to sew. To start off, I'll transfer my template.
Now we're just gonna measure out how long the elastic needs to be. We can go from the end of the old one, which worked pretty good, about right there.
I'll use some tape again to hold the parts together during sewing. To get the strap hanging out between the seam, I'll bundle it up on the inside. That way, when I inside it out, the long end goes on the inside And the short end goes on the outside. Once inside outed, I'll sew both of the edges together and sew the middle detailed seams. Now once again, I want these parts to have some volume to them, so I'll stuff them with fluff and do the last few passes on the sewing machine. With that, these straps are finished and can be mounted to the vest. Before I mount these permanently to the vest, I need a way to attach the shoulder pads. Now you could avoid the elastic strap altogether, like some channels, but I want to be as accurate to the show as possible, so I'll sew some Velcro to the elastic straps rather than to the undersuit itself. Maybe the tape method isn't so great after all. Anyway, now that these straps are finished, I can put the vest on, line them up, and glue them into place using, you guessed it, E6000. While that's drying, I'll glue the hook side of the Velcro to the shoulder pads using the same overlap method as before. I'll do the same on the other side, but be sure to glue the half-inch padding down first. With the straps done, this thing is really starting to feel real now. Now that the glue is dry, I'll remove the original straps using a seam ripper, but then we'll quickly give up and go back to using scissors. I'll then reinforce the attachment using some stitches going over the original seam lines to better hide the attachment. While many of these files were lost, all of the armor pieces were attached using a similar manner. I'll start off by cutting out the appropriate length of Velcro and then pinning it to the suit where it most likely goes. I'll then test and adjust it until it looks right. Once it's in the right place, it can be sewn down using some black thread. Like many parts of this build, I wanted to save money wherever possible. This was one of those times where I should have splurged. I bought a massive sheet of this charcoal wood material from Joann's for like 16 bucks. The good stuff is about twice that amount, but it can't make that much of a difference, right? Alright, I laid it down and left a few extra inches from where I thought I should go. Using the world's most dull pair of scissors, I attempted to cut the fabric, which clearly didn't work. So I'll use a sharp knife instead. I'll then cut the neck hole and place the fabric on the mannequin, being sure to mimic the folds on the real suit. Once I was happy with it, I sewed it together, that way the folds wouldn't come undone. I then sewed on this piece of hook Velcro folded in half in order to attach it to the suit. Now, I have never worked with leather in my life. Actually, I've never even touched a sewing machine before this project, but with the mild success so far, I figured it was time to get some more gear. I bought a couple of metal rulers, a pizza style cutter, and best of all, a bunch of these little clamps. I also purchased a large sheet of leather from Amazon. Using my template as a guide, I cut out the first strip, being sure to leave some extra as I want to be able to fold over the edges and glue them together. I started off by using this old bottle of contact cement, but quickly switched back to E6000. I made the fold and used the clamps to hold it all together. I then repeated this process on the other side. While that's drying, I can move on to the ammo holder. I'll start off by sewing a strip of this lighter leather to a thick strip of this fake black leather. I'll then use a socket that's slightly smaller than the ammo and sew loop. That way it all holds together. If you plan to do this yourself, I highly recommend checking out the Welding Geeks videos. They were full of great tips, and I took great inspiration from what he did. Once these were all finished, I cut a strip of the chocolate brown leather and made sure the ammo fit the belt. I then transferred the loop location to the brown leather and carefully cut it out. With that done, I can test fit everything, which looks good. I'll then cut a hole which the strap can pass through and sew it down. After that, I'll sew 2 more stitches between each loop to match the reference. I'll then sew down the end of the leather strap to hold it in place and begin sewing around the perimeter, which my sewing machine didn't enjoy at all. Hopefully I think of a better way to do this in the future. It all keeps bunching up, so I'll cut the end loose and yeah, that looks terrible. Maybe the other side won't be as bad.
What is going on?
Yeah, that's even worse somehow. If anybody knows how to do this properly, please let me know. Moving on, I'll cut off all the extra fabric and put the ammo in place, which helps hide some of the wrinkles. Now these parts need to be fastened to the shin armor, so I'll use some Velcro along with my standard gluing technique. I then tried to attach the Velcro using the sewing machine, which went horribly wrong.
Oh my God, what? What the heck is that? What is that? What is that?
Yeah, maybe I should have watched more than one how to sew video before starting this project. Anyway, I'll just cut a new one and start from scratch. With that, the leather parts of the shin armor are finished. With some sewing experience now under my belt, I figured it was finally time to move on to some more complicated parts. I started by squaring off this chunk of leather. I then made another rectangle the same size using this faux black leather. Using this ruler as a basis of measurement, as one does, except I, use the ruler, I cut out a bunch of strips. This will recreate the pleated look at the bottom. With all those done, I hemmed the short side of the black leather. Using the mini clips, I carefully attached the first leather strip and sewed it into place. The leather kept on getting bunched up, so I took off all the clips and eyeballed it. Which, yeah, not my finest work. Luckily for me, I left a whole lot of extra, so I was able to trim it all flush. I then repeated this process for the rest of the pleats. With all those attached, I was able to get the overall length marked out. Now, I was sure to make it extra long in order to recreate the folds in the fabric. With that done, I can now move on to the pleats on top of the leg. I'll start by trimming all the excess and... You gotta be kidding me! That wasn't even filmed that long ago! How could it all be gone? Oh, you know what? I'm done. I'm done. Go. Now, with a little bit more leather working experience under my belt, I can now move on to the belt and bandolier. That's how you say that, right? I started off by... With the bulk of the belt made, I can attach these chrome snap connectors to replicate the details on the belt.
Oops.
It looks like I drilled a little too far on this one. To attach the belt buckle, I'll drill some holes and use some Chicago screws to hold it in place. Now, seeing this piece unfolded gives you a rough idea on how I made it. I sewed the top piece of leather separate from the bottom one. This prevented that weird shrinkage happening and made it look much cleaner. However, that means I'll have to glue both sides together. Using some contact cement, I pretended to glue both halves together. Then masked off the areas that I did not want glue to get on. I then used Gorilla Spray glue to glue it together because I wasn't sure how well the contact cement would work as it's very old. I then repeated the same process on the other side. Now, time to make the pouches. I started off by having a brain aneurysm while holding my template. I then transferred my template to some leather, being sure to mark all of the fold lines. I then carefully cut the pieces out. Now, I don't want to permanently glue this on, so I'll make a couple of slits that the belt can pass through. I used one of the buttons to recreate the clasp for the strap. And with that, the pouch is finished. Just kidding, I need to glue in some foam to give it volume. So I'll use some spray glue to hold it down. To finish it up, I'll use some E6000 to hold the pouch shut. For this piece, the sewing is purely aesthetic and serves no real purpose. This makes it a lot easier for me to make and looks very good at the end. As discussed before, the buckle in front doesn't work, so the whole thing will be held on with some Velcro in the back. After a whole bunch of test fitting, I eventually found the angle and position that I want the belt and bandolier to intersect. So I marked it, clamped it, and fastened it together. The rivets I used for this are carefully hidden behind one of the bullet loops, that way no one can see them. With everything in place, I can now trim off the excess and begin working on the back strap. To find the ideal length, I clamped a tape measure to the top of the bandolier, stretched it around my back, and used that number. To hopefully keep everything together while I sew, I'm using some masking tape to hold everything tight, which worked pretty well. I'll use some Velcro in the back to allow for some adjustability and to make it easier to get on and off. I'll then clamp everything together and sew it all in place. With that done, I 3D printed and finished this piece off camera and glued it into place. Once the glue had dried, I used a rip to give it some extra strength and to match the reference. With that, the bandolier is finished. Using lots of reference, I decided to make the template off camera, as it took more than 5 hours. While I could have purchased it on Etsy for a reasonable price, I decided to do it on my own because I just find it more fulfilling that way. It's a good skill to learn and will help you with many future projects. Just as before, I'm doing my best to make sure that all of the stitching is cosmetic and that none of it is structural. I would love to be able to do this properly, but I can't quite figure out how to go about that. If you actually know how to sew, please let me know any tips or suggestions you have down in the comments. The holster has this solid ridge running down the front, which I'm going to be making by wrapping a piece of leather around this piece of wood. Using spray glue, I carefully stretch the leather over the piece. I'll use my sewing machine to attach this piece, which worked out great. I was able to sew the left side with the machine, but the right side I'll have to do by hand. For this, I'm going to try to use saddle stitching, which is fairly easy to do. You're supposed to use normal needles for this, but I didn't have any, so I'm just going to use sewing machine needles instead, which shouldn't really have too many issues. Yeah, the wide base of the needles made it pretty difficult to push through the leather, which definitely added a lot more time and made the thread much more prone to tearing off. While it may have been the most time-consuming, This piece is by far my favorite part of the build. But with that piece drying, all the leather parts are finished. Once again, for this part of the build, I'm going to be using 3D printing to manufacture these parts. My longer LK1 has never let me down and always prints just super. Okay, so I guess for this part, I'll try making it out of foam. I'll start off by once all the pieces are cut, I'll spray glue them into place. With it dried, I'll cut a slight chamfer on all the sides and sand it smooth to hide the seams. Using a heat gun, I give the armor some shaping while heat sealing the foam at the same time. Both of these plates will be sealed with a clear plasti dip, followed by some ink blue Krylon paint. Now time for my favorite part, the weathering. I pulled up a reference photo and mixed some paints to match. With that, these pieces are nice, sturdy, and finished. With all of the armor pieces fully smooth and primed, it's finally time to give them their black base coat. I'll start off by wet sanding all of the pieces with a high grit sandpaper. Once that's done, I'll degrease all of the parts and wipe them down, which I highly recommend not using paper towel and getting some real shop rags, because it's always leaving behind these little stupid fibers and I just end up using my shirt. I'm using Krylon matte black for the base. Which went on super smoothly, except for this piece. While it's smooth already, I want to take it a step further and wet sand the base coat. This should help the clear coat go down too, because the water seems to stick to the sanded parts better. I haven't seen any studies on this or anything, but come on, think about it. With all the parts sanded, I can now attach the ears using a small drop of super glue. Which ended up spilling all over the earpiece and my hands. So I'll attach the other one in a way that just isn't skibbity brain rot. Cut that out of the video. I'll sand it back down to primer and reapply the black base coat. With everything dry, I can degrease everything one last time using the best kind of shop rag, my old MTV shirt, and get ready to paint. I have never watched MTV in my life. I built this Thomas helmet a while back in order to test out this paint job, which as you can see has many drips. So I sanded them all down and tried out this auto wax, which looks like shit. I got this Harbor Freight buffing wheel, that's not good, and tried a different product which should work better. Yeah, now I see why people put compound on the wheel and not the thing being polished. Even though I look like Daddy's little princess after her first week in college, the finish looks immaculate. I'll then spray some of this new chrome paint I want to try, doing my best to feather it into the all-clad, which looks great. The clear coat has been drying for a few days now, and I want to do a test piece before moving on to the rest of the suit. So I'll spray this Duralumin down with my airbrush on one of the thigh plates, which really looks quite terrible. Maybe the clear isn't dry enough, or I sprayed it on too quick. Hopefully I don't have any more issues like this. Now, I want the finish to look something like these charges. So I'll try some basic weathering techniques, which look all right. It may be hard to tell, but there's a lot of weird drips and other artifacts in this finish. So I'll be sure to sand and buff it like I did in my test, being sure to eat right through the clear coat and the base coat and right into the primer. Now the chest is even worse. There's no water sprayed on here. These are little chunks of clear coat. My guess is that there was some water in the airlines before I sprayed it, but who knows? Not me. I'm the guy who mixed 2K clear coat into Solo Cup and freaked out as it slowly ate through. Yeah, that's what this guy is over here. You see that? You see that through there? God, I'm an idiot. All these clumps should stand right out and look good as new. Now keep this in mind. This video isn't necessarily a guide on how you should build a suit like this. Many of these techniques or products I am using are not likely the best for this application. This is just me figuring out how I can make this thing in a way that makes sense to me. Hopefully it's at least entertaining, if not educational. It's definitely not educational. With all of these pieces polished, it's finally time to spray the chrome. I'm using Duralumin chrome paint because it's one of the stronger chrome paints out there, and I don't want to have to put a clear coat on top of this finish. I'll slowly creep up on the opacity, which should give a really nice mirror shine, which was seeming to go pretty well, but the more and more I sprayed, the worse and worse the finish got. You can see that there is definitely something wrong with the chest piece. Later on, when I was cleaning out the airbrush, I noticed that the siphon tube was a lot looser than it was before, like it had been melted by something. Oh, well, that explains the poor application. Hopefully it won't look too bad in the end. To keep the paint from chipping away and to keep the noise down, I'll add some EVA foam to the back of the chest plate using hot glue. For the shoulders, I'll cut down some acoustic foam in order to give the shoulders the proper padding needed to recreate the broad look in the shell. A lot of people forget this stuff, and it always makes the suit look slightly off. I'm looking at you, Aaron. Just kidding, Aaron, I love you. Now, with every other cosplay helmet I've ever built, there's always been one major problem, and that's the visor fogging up. I found this cheap face shield on Amazon that says it has this anti-fogging coating on it, so I'll give it a try. It seems to work pretty good outside the helmet, so yeah. I'll start off by adding some 5% tint. I'll then use a heat gun to give it a slight pre-curve. This prevents the center of the visor from going flat, which sadly plagues some of my other Mando attempts. Yeah, this isn't the first one. With that finished, I'll carefully trace my template and cut out the visor. I'll keep it in place using hot glue. Which kind of was the mistake? Now we need some ammo casings for this shin armor, so I'll finish them using techniques shown earlier in this video and throw them in the strap. Oh God. It's all a nice and tight fit, that way they don't ever fall out. To keep the strap from falling down, I'll use some VHB double-sided tape to hold it in place. Kinda makes the whole Velcro thing useless, but you know. While the original dollar store electronics worked fine for the most part, I wanted something a bit better for the final suit. I bought these USB rechargeable 9-volt batteries from Amazon, which have a very nice long battery life and feel a lot more professional than my previous solution. I also got some heat shrink, which makes me feel like I truly know what I'm doing. I decided to ditch the flicker bulb as it wasn't really doing much and use no switch, as I want there to be as few sources of failure as possible. While I didn't show this on camera, feeding these LEDs through the messy holes and the infill of the 3D print was an absolute turbo Duramax Power Stroke V8 Cummins nightmare. They kept getting caught and stuck inside the infill of the print itself, but it was well worth it in the end because it adds so much to the look and feel of the suit. And with that, the electronics are finished. I got these leather gloves off of Amazon and cut their fingers off. With everything dried and put together, it's time to do the weathering, which you can see just how much of a difference it makes. The key to getting a screen-accurate look is to use some brown shoe polish on the yellow parts of the gloves. I'll use some black and brown paint for the hand plate weathering, and finish it off by scraping away the paint to reveal the black plastic beneath. With that, these gloves are finished. For the final part of the build, we have the thermal charges that Mando uses. I'd like to show you how I finished them, but you can already guess what happened. So to finish this part off, we need to wrap it in leather. I'll roughly cut down the leather and glue it into place. Once that was dry, I used some glue and screws to hold the rest of the leather in place. To make the next step easier, I'll super glue around the ridges and cut away the excess leather once it dries. It's not the most perfect finish, but will certainly do, and will get hidden once I do the weathering, which I will definitely remember to do. With that done, the Mandalorian suit is finished.